Yellow Springs Board of Education, March 8, 2018 meeting. The board was in executive session, which started at 6:30 for personnel matters regarding employment and compensation of an employee or employees. We are now moving into our regular meeting. So, we don't need to do roll call for that, because we already did that. So we're moving into February 8th, approval of minutes. Is there a motion? Any issues? Motion?
So moved. Second.
Any issues with those minutes? Okay, roll call.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Aida?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight and acknowledge the people who are present, which there are many of, and also ask that if you haven't already, if you sign in that little book there, just to give us a record of who's in attendance. Moving on to communications, presentations, and reports, 2.1. Communications, we have a letter from Shannon Wilson dated January 10th, 2018, as well as a letter from Valerie Kirk dated February 26th, 2018, and also a letter from James Walk dated March 1st, 2018. I'd like to recognize any of the members of the audience who are not here to give a presentation, who might wish to address the board.
Hi, I'm Eli Hurwitz. I'm the president of the Yellow Springs Education Association. Thank you, Madam President. I'm here to celebrate our teachers a little bit. This last Friday we had a PD day where all of our teachers did two different amazing things. The first thing that they did was a PD around the projects that they've been working on. They either took a project that they've successfully completed in the past and they refreshed it for use in the future. Many people left that feeling refreshed. Another group of teachers took an idea, and I'm going to take this time to thank the public and the community at large publicly for sending in ideas. I put out a call on Facebook and in the newspaper, and I got lots of emails and lots of ideas through Facebook and through our survey of potential projects and potential purposes. And so this second professional development was around the use of purposes instead of a product. So tonight you're going to see the purpose of changing our grading system, and the product is they came up with a different way of recognizing our graduates. The teachers that went to this PD came up with many purposes. One of them potentially affecting all of Mills Lawn next year in the way of how can we build community both in our school and outside. The other thing we did on the PD day was a poverty simulation, which both surprised me and many teachers, and it was astoundingly wonderful. And so think tank that brought it really affected teachers immensely, and hopefully we'll see that moving forward. I want to celebrate the 5 teachers that are going to Peru with 40 travelers in 2 weeks, 14 days. It's quite a thing, and thinking about purposes, I'd like to ask the community to continue to send in ideas around purposes, not products. Though we just saw a tuning this. I went to a tuning this last Wednesday where John Day brought up the idea of podcasting, and as a product, it's something that can meet the needs of many purposes, and he's doing wonderful things with it. So I'd really like people to go to our website and see his, listen to his classes podcasts. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else want to address the board at this time? All right, moving into schools in action. I'd like to introduce a new staff person, and I'll let Mario.
Thank you, Madam President and Board of Education members. So I we went through a very long process. As you know, Susan is retiring. Susan is the executive assistant at the Board of Education office. For those of you who don't know, students, basically she's the top sort of the most the most needed secretary in the district, I think, and does probably a significant amount of work for the entire district, helps it all run in both buildings, works very closely with the building secretaries, like, you know, the Julies in your building, and so she's amazing, and she's retiring after, I believe, 20-something years in the district, I think, and it's going to be hard without her, certainly to do it. We knew it was going to be difficult and challenging, but we went through a process to hire her replacement, and we got 350 applicants, which is really crazy. And we narrowed that pool down from 320 down to 22 that we actually did a phone screen interview on. The end of the phone screen, so a couple things that we were looking for in the phone screen. Since we have high school students here, I can share that with them. I think it's important for them to know. So this is some things that employers are looking for. We were looking specifically for somebody who had deep interpersonal skills, the ability to connect with others and build relationships and be able to solve complex problems. A lot of the work that we're trying to get, what you all are doing in school, is super important for the workforce after school and after college, and that was really, really important to us, paramount. And so we went through this process, and we asked a lot. We are also interested in people who are curious and curious learners. So I want somebody who's actually going to be able to learn when they get on the job. It's one thing to have the skills before you start the job, but a lot of times so many jobs are shifting nowadays in the 21st century that you really don't know all the skills before you start. We need somebody who's got the ability to actually learn those skills once they're on the job. And so things that we can't teach is the ability, the willingness and the ability to learn and be a learner, be curious about things, and then the ability to really connect with people. Those are both critically important, and we looked and we screened for that as our interview process. So we took that group of 22 and took it down to 9, and then we interviewed face-to-face 9 people, and then we took that group of 9 and went down to a group of 3, and we took those 3 and they each spent 3 hours with us in different days in the office where they got to know the district office staff. They ate lunch with us. We took them to the buildings. They got to know what Susan was doing and did her job. It was all kind of part of trying to figure out relationship and making sure it's a fit and making sure that we can indeed have a connection and it could work well. And throughout that process, out of 350 people, there was one person that stood at the top, honestly, from the very beginning. And kind of the whole way there was right there. And that's the woman you can see back there hiding, Stephanie Marchese. I get it right?
You got it right.
Stephanie is, so it's cool about Stephanie, she's a Yellow Springs resident. She teaches yoga at House of Om. She worked at Antioch at one point, college. She's worked at a place called Echoing You, which did some really interesting work around education in our kids, and she's worked at a lot of different experiences. She worked at CNBC for a long time and did some amazing work out there in New York City. And so she comes with a really varied background and a lot of project management skills that I think are essential and important to this work here. But most importantly, I think the thing that impresses us the most is she's got great interpersonal skills. She will, I think, learn quickly on the job and be able to do a lot of that work. And I think our staff and our community will really be pleased with her. And I think she has a passion. So that's another word, keyword, passion. She's got a passion for the Yellow Springs community and a passion for this work and helping kids and community. And I think that combination is going to be kind of the deadly combination we need to help us do the work we're doing. So Stephanie, I didn't even give you advance notice of this, but in about 30 seconds I'm going to ask you, see if you have anything to say to the community or the Board of Education. They're going to turn the camera around and look at you. You're going to see me, or you're going to go to the microphone.
Yeah, she'll have to walk
So, do you mind saying a few words?
Right.
Do I need to walk up there?
You don't have to, right? Yeah. You can just say thank you.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Mario. That was a very humbling introduction. And passion, he was absolutely 100%. I have a lot of passion for this community, and I'm really excited to get to contribute and hopefully make a difference. And I know I've got really big shoes to fill, but I look forward to learning from Susan and continuing the hard work that she's done with the Yellow Springs community and the schools. So I look forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So,
Start day.
So start date is April 2nd on the agenda. We talked about the possibility that she may need to start a week earlier. We'll see. I think we'll start working through that. I need to talk to Stephanie about that and see where we are with that. If that's the case, we can adjust and make that happen fairly easy. So just FYI. Second piece, B. So this is what we're kind of all waiting for and excited about. We have students here from Miss Holly's statistics class. And one of the things that we've learned through the deeper learning we're trying to do and the work with project-based learning is when there's a problem in the school buildings, we often, in the past several years, we'd say the adults got to figure out a way to solve that problem. Now we're trying to figure out ways to get kids to work to solve the complex problems we have within our district and within the community, and they're doing it. And so this is a good example of that. It's a super authentic project. The challenge is always has been, and the kids will tell you, it's about math is one of the most challenging topics to really do some project-based learning work in, and I think they found a way to do it authentically in statistics class. And so I'm just not going to say anything else. I'll let you all kind of lead into the problem and how you recommended the solution you have. So I introduced the statistics students at Yellow Springs High School.
Slideshow tab.
Down there.
This button right here.
So as Mr. Restore said, we were from Solid Statistics class, and we were charged to make a proposal for the actions that we should take after the revision of the state law 2 years ago, which changed it so that from that point on, we had to accommodate a scale in which a 90 would be a 5 in any college credit plus class, which differed from the plan that we had before, which was a 96 and above being a 5.0 in that class. We also are looking at a proposed band system that would accommodate a 4-point scale, which could change from a valedictorian, salutatorian to a Latin honors system. This is the state law that was revised, and we were just kind of giving it to you. You all probably know.
We've memorized it. I read this before I go to bed. So as Dr. Carr has previously said, it has put a thumb on the scale, which is favoring CC plus courses over Yellow Springs courses, including AP courses. So 3 different scales that we'll be looking at are the previous scale, 96 and above is an H in AP and college credit plus classes. The current scale that we have right now, 90% and above is an H, and the proposed scale that we have, which is no H at all, with just a regular 4.0 system with no H's. So with the help of Mr. Smith, we got some data from the first 3 years of the class of 2018, so we had a sample set to work with. So as you can see, the red is, each dot is a person's GPA. So in the red is the 96 and a greater is a 5.0 or an H, which is what we had before. And then with the new scale that we have right now is the blue, where a 90 and above is an H. So as you can see, this is just a zoomed in part of the top half of the class because they're the main ones that are affected. The top few people aren't affected at all because if they took a college credit plus or an AP course, then they already got an H in it. So the new scale doesn't change anything. But as you can see, once you get into this range right here, especially number 10 right here, which we'll be talking about later, they jump up a lot. So they probably took a lot of college courses or AP courses, and they didn't get an H in it, but they got an A. And so under the new scale, their GPA is boosted. You can see number 10, this person went from being number 10th in the class to number 1 in the class by taking lots of college credit plus courses. And so, keep that person in mind later.
So, one thing that we looked at was the mean, standard deviations, and or Z-scores the data for these three groups, the old system, the current fix, and the proposed system. So under the old system, under which a 96 and above in the CC plus or AP class was a 5 in GPA, if you compare that to our current fix, the standard deviation goes up because you have a higher spread of scores, and the high-end people's scores are only going up, and you have a greater distribution. The mean also goes up because people's scores can only go up moving to that system. And if you compare that to the system with no age, obviously the mean is going to go down because there's no opportunity to get above a 4.0 on GPA. And the standard deviation also decreases because there's a smaller spread of scores on the high end. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So here's another way to represent that data that David was looking at earlier. So here we have the data from the old system. There we have the data from our proposed, or our current fix to it, and here's our proposed system. So under the old system, again, only the top people in the class are being affected. These are frequency histograms displaying the data. And if you look at these top 3 columns here in this chart versus this chart, you can see the second and third columns actually decrease going from this one to this one. And the top bar in this chart increases, and actually a new bar is created because somebody's moving into a new category. So the people who are being moved up are people who got between a 90 and a 96 in AP and CC plus classes. So they're being artificially moved up. And we don't feel like that's fair because the whole point of giving people, of having that 5 as an opportunity was to mean that people who worked really hard and were able to get top grades in those classes were able to move up. And now that's being expanded to people who we had no intention previously of acknowledging and increasing their GPA. So that just didn't make sense to us. And then if you look at the system where there's no HR proposed system, it's obviously capped at 4.0, and it also better resembles a bell curve, so there are people kind of being boosted up into higher categories when it doesn't make sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it. So another problem is the nature of CC plus classes versus AP classes. So you can take more CC plus classes in a year than you can AP classes because CC plus classes only last a semester typically. And in terms of,
No, you're fine.
in terms of GPA, every CC plus class counts the same as an AP class. So you're doing work for half the amount of time, but it's increasing your GPA by the same amount. Additionally, most of the people who gave us input about this project concurred that CC plus classes are not more difficult, certainly not twice as difficult as most AP classes. So it's not like it's compensating by being twice as difficult. Also, CC plus classes you can take beginning in 7th grade, whereas people typically start taking AP classes around 10th grade, so you have half the amount of time to get those 5s in your GPA. So we just feel like it's a lot easier to get 5s and boost up your GPA by taking CC plus as opposed to staying at our school, and that's providing people with an incentive to leave our school and take classes somewhere else.
So another really important factor to look at is how colleges break down the GPA system when they're looking at what students they're going to accept. And a really important thing to note is that most colleges do look at the unweighted scale, so that would be converting it back to a 4.0. So the 5.0 system would just be artificially inflating these grades, and it might look nice for the students at the time, but it really doesn't make any difference ultimately in the final decision for their school. And a quote that we kind of like to note is, it says, this is by Mary Beth Sacramone, it says, students don't choose classes they want because of their GPAs in a weighted system, and that's mainly saying that like they just want to get the grade for it, they're not actually interested in it. And we really think that if you take away the 5-point scale, it's going to encourage students to take classes that they actually want to learn. And so these are the proposed bandwidths. We had Dr. Cryer made a set of bandwidths as well that would accommodate the 5-point system to how it is right now with the 90% and up being a 5-point scale. But we decided that since our statistical data showed us that a 4-point scale would be better, we would make one to accommodate that. And we wanted to make sure that the requirements for the lowest level would be higher than the National Honor Society to kind of invite a more prestigious group of students in. But also, we wanted to leave a little bit of wiggle room in the top bar because we didn't want to discourage students from taking risks on their classes. So based off of a 21-point scale, that would leave 1B in the top, which is, it's not very much, but also it's something that students could take into consideration when they wanted to maybe try a more difficult class that they wouldn't originally want to do.
And real quick, that was assuming that all those are, so the person wouldn't get any C's, D's, or F's, it would only be A's and just like 1, 4, or 7 B's.
Correct. So the conclusion we came to is that the 4-point scale would be the most efficient in helping students in the long run get to the result that they desired, and that the Latin honor system would be the best way to go to accommodate that scale also.
So, can I just sort of intro into some Q&A maybe? This is pretty, what we told the kids is that, their recommendations taken super seriously, and I think, we're looking at moving forward with this idea. I just want to make it clear to the board, this is sort of, so this is more of an administrative policy and guideline, not something that's a board policy level. This change would fit under board policy as it's designed and as it's set up now. But probably the decision's made more at my level than it is and the principal level versus the board level. I just want to make sure you all are at least aware of that. But I want to open it up for questions, I think, for the board, if you all are ready, and you're okay. And maybe Ms. Holly, do you want to add anything maybe that wasn't shared already?
No, I think they did a very good job. This class is juniors and seniors who are high-achieving kids. They originally wanted to make the highest band only 4.0s. We had to talk them into lowering their standards a little bit so that they could take risk and take a class that might not, feel like they're going to be super successful in, but try it as well. And I think it was a good proposal that they came up with.
Awesome. So I guess.
Well, I'll just start out by making a comment. One, I think it's great research and analysis that you've done. This is a real issue. It's not only an issue unique to our school. I've been in plenty of CC Plus workshops and meetings, and they're constantly trying to figure out all the challenges that come up. And this is one that reoccurs, not only in our district, but in other districts. And I really encourage you to present this beyond this room, certainly, or beyond this district, but share your research with neighboring districts that are also wrestling with this problem, and in some cases have the opposite effect. I wrote down here, the artificially moving up. Some districts are having artificially moving down. I mean, they're actually having dealing with a different challenge caused by CC Plus. But I certainly encourage you to take it on the road, submit it somewhere, get it accepted, and present it to a larger audience.
Yeah, Ohio School Board Association.
There you go.
November, How many of you are seniors, I think? How many of you are juniors? That's a better question. Maybe the seniors can do it too, but you all.
My favorite part of that is the senior achievement presentations. It's my favorite part of the conference.
Well, that's great too, and I think they could run an actual session, and with the school board members from across the state of Ohio, and that would be really cool,
Yeah, even the Ohio Department of Higher Education, which writes or enforces these rules and guidelines, that would be a great audience to even just write this up and send it to. And I'd be happy to give you
Dr. Creighton's got the connection.
the person to send it to, because they would really value this information.
So I have one comment and then just one question, which is maybe an embarrassing point of clarification for myself. Even though students can take the AP classes as early as 7th grade, would it only start being
They call it CC
the CC Plus, sorry,
Okay.
would that only be reflected though in the GPA that we're talking about for the ones that they start taking in 9th grade, or
They would be
how does that
for the
work?
high school.
Okay, so that's even more,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so like when we were talking to Mr. Smith, he said that if we were to change to a 4-point scale, it would take a while for the highest GPA to be a 4.0, because we do have either a 7th or 8th grader that's actually taking a college course. So I mean, it would take a while, but that does, even if you take it in middle school, it does count as to your high school GPA.
And then I just really appreciate, because it's sort of another part of the real world piece, there's the real world piece of what's going on within the high school setting, but then also linking it to what happens, what are the colleges really doing with the GPAs? After all of this finagling, then if it's being scaled back down, I'm glad you all brought that part into it. Steve?
So I just start by saying this was a terrific job. It was really clear, it was really concise, and so you distilled what is clearly a tremendous amount of research into a really sharp presentation. I also want to say, because the whole college credit plus thing it drives me personally out of my mind. This is an extraordinarily creative way of addressing the issue here, and so I'm really impressed with what you've come up with. My question to you is, as you discuss this with your comrades, what kinds of reactions are you getting from other students?
I think
Blowback, or are they enthusiastic?
I really think that an important thing to note is that it's difficult to get the point across that colleges do not look at the weighted grades.
Right.
And so there is pushback from some of the other students, but I think if that's made clear,
Yep.
then there will be a lot more resounding, accommodation to this.
No, I think it could be quite the opposite. If word trickles out that students at Yellow Springs have designed their own GPA system, that GPA all of a sudden is going to stand out in ways that other high school, they won't. I think this could actually be a positive good in that direction. So
So if I could add something else to your comment. So I remember this year when students kind of heard about the fact that like the old system couldn't exist anymore. And for a lot of students who had worked super hard to get H's in classes, that was like just a kick in the teeth. It's like, I've worked so hard for that now, that system just can't exist anymore. So I think that we've tried to make the best of a situation that nobody wanted to deal with
yeah.
in that respect.
That's a great perspective, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about the risk. So the risk unless it says require not all these, explain like exactly what that would mean, so what does happen if somebody was terrible in a class they had to take and didn't get the A, in fact got a C, about how badly would that translate into, because a risk means that there's another factor to that.
So that
and this encourages risk, and I definitely applaud that. I also want to state you guys are excellent. But I'd like to know more about that risk, and how do you explain to someone who is absolutely dire afraid of taking that risk? It's like, do you let them know a C is not going to take them out of the running? Will a C take them out of the running? How do you explain that risk to me, if you can, a little more in depth of like, what happens if they get a C?
So if they're in that top tier, it's probably going to be most likely that if they get a C, they'll probably get bumped down to the second spot here.
So it is a risk.
It is definitely a risk, but I would hope, and I think we were anticipating in this top point that the students would have enough forethought to maybe think about, what they think would be too much of a course load maybe to maintain that grade point average, or, they would probably attempt to get at least a B.
And also,
Right.
Yeah.
But if they do get a B, then it's still,
Then they'll
that's
still
what
be
that one
they'll still be
is
in the
about.
top tier.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
and also we're still acknowledging people who may have gotten a C in all A's or some other combination or permutation of that. It's not like we're only recognizing that top category. That's why we have multiple levels of it. Like, we're still saying you did a great job.
Anybody that falls within these grade point averages is going to be recognized. So it's going to be a group of students.
Kate, were you going to chime in?
I was going to say something similar to that like even if we're like acknowledging like risks and such, I think it's still a much better system than having where you have two people competing. Like our grade, like seniors in here know, our grade particularly, we're a competitive bunch, so it's like like the battle for like Val and Sal is very it's very nerve-wracking, it's very stressful for a lot of people who are like the people who are like right up there, but they're like 0.01 point off, and it's like they deserve some type of recognition. You have Val, Sal, and then like nothing after that. Here we have those people. We just have 3 people in summa cum laude, and that's like the same amount of recognition. So we're saying that all people who are high achieving like that deserve some form
Yeah.
of.
We also wanted to make
recognition
sure
like
that
that.
it wasn't like a participation award.
Yeah.
That's why we
Oh, yeah,
kind
no,
of
it's-
made
this is how it works.
we kind of made
Yeah.
the lower band higher than the National Honor Society. That's why we did that.
And when we were just talking about the bands, another thing we talked about is like, should we have a certain proportion of the class be honored instead of having a standard? So like, the top 5% will be in this category. But we decided on this system largely because we decided that it shouldn't be just because you have a low achieving class or a high achieving class that should change the standards. Like the standards, I mean these all standards are subject to change, but we thought it made sense to have the same standards year to year so that the recognition meant the same thing for this class and this class. That just made sense to us.
So you're talking about criterion reference versus norm reference, is that?
Yes.
the right
Yeah,
term?
So-
like, for example, it'd be like, let's say there was a not high achieving class that the top two people got like a, on a 4-point scale, they got like one person got a 4.9, and then the next, second person in the class got like a 3.75, and then everything else was below that. So you would have one person in this band, and then you'd have you'd have like one or maybe a few people in this class in this band, but no one would be in this band. So it's very rigid, and it's not just going after those top two people, because those top two people, they may just stand out to their grade, but like by themselves, it may not be outstanding. So we're going very rigid with the criteria.
I have one question. My biggest thing that I wrestled with around this issue, and maybe you all we can kind of talk about it a little bit together here and dialogue about this, is this idea of how do we, so if APs are no longer weighted, how do we encourage kids to take AP classes versus taking something that maybe is not as rigorous and getting the same grade that's essentially weighted the same? I know you all have thought about this, so I really want you to share your opinions.
So if I can say something quickly. Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
Now we're probably gonna say something similar here. I was just gonna say that because another thing we're also doing is we went through the college application process, and one of the most important things is that the coursework of the classes you're taking are at a college level. The GPA is important too, but the classes that you chose to take, that says something about you as a student. And if you're in all these APs, that shows something about you as a student. Doesn't matter if they're worth a 5 or 4, whatever. That shows that you're high achieving and you can take a challenge like that. So and then it also factors in stuff like teacher recommendations and other more holistic stuff like that factor in everything about the student and not just the points themselves, because that's not the only thing that factors in.
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. The students who mainly are taking on AP classes are going to do that for reasons besides just their GPA. There are other reasons why people want to take those classes. They want rigorous classes. They want that to look good on the college application.
And that way you're relating it back again to another part of the college application process, like the recalibrating of the grades.
Yeah.
The college applications do look at AP courseload differently than non-AP.
And I guess I would only just add to that college admissions officers are pretty savvy at knowing what's available for students to take at different high schools. And so they know that there was an AP option here, you chose not to take it. Well, that's going to make you look one way, but you did take it, so that's going to make you look another way. So I think you're right, Peter, that the incentives here aren't about GPA. They're about sort of the portfolio that you would present going forward.
I have a question. Is it an intention to disincentivize people from taking CCP courses? Is there a reason why you wouldn't want to promote taking CCP?
Well, part of that is part of this is trying to even the playing field. So before we said that the film was on the scale for CC Plus because they weren't as rigorous as AP courses, and a lot of people were going outside of the school to go through these CC Plus courses. So CC Plus was kind of held on a pedestal, saying this is what you should take.
Because
so,
you could get a 5.
Because you could get
by
more
getting a
fives
90.
in, you could get more 5s in a smaller amount of time.
Because each
And-
CC plus
You could
course
take
is
2.
1 semester.
Yeah.
Right.
And you could take, double the amount of courses you could.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so this kind of makes, it helps even the playing field with both of them. So it kind of, instead of having one much over the other, then it evens it out. It's not, and you could see this as disincentivizing CC plus, but we think it's more of making APs and college courses more even.
So first of all, I appreciate the work and I think it's high quality. And one aspect that I like about these bandwidths is that you actually will probably end up recognizing achievement more across the board because, like you said, it's not going to just be the valedictorian and salutatorian. So I think that's awesome. Question I have, and I don't know how far you went down this road, is when you're looking at CC plus, what's your opinion of that system? Did you guys discuss that or debate that a little bit in terms of, do you think that that's something that's going to help high schoolers going to college? Do you approve of that system? Do you not? I'm just curious.
So, I can personally speak to this. I think the CC Plus can be great because I've had opportunities to take classes that simply aren't offered in our high school and that interested me greatly. I think that's what CC Plus is about, is taking classes that you can't take in your high school. And I forgot your question.
Just your opinion on it. Do you think it's going to help high schoolers as they transition? Do you think
I
it's a good idea?
I think it can be helpful, but it's not. And I've specifically spoken to college professors and college professor Rice State specifically about this issue. He says most of his students who take CC Plus classes and get out of certain intro levels classes are far less prepared than those who took the intro level classes how you are supposed to in college. That was obviously his personal experience. But I think that it's not just like, oh, it's all great and you're getting ready for college, because also I think most people in our class would agree that AP classes are often more difficult and more rigorous.
Well, there's pressure amongst high school teachers that or people that teach CC Plus to make sure that the coursework is something that high schoolers can handle. So I think there is an issue of watering it down. Is it college level work or not? I think that's a big.
So back in the midst of time when these programs were invented, the dual enrollments and then what became College Credit Plus, it was precisely for what Peter just described. So if somebody wanted to take Italian, but we don't offer Italian here, you have an opportunity at a local institution to go do that. In the last, whatever you want to call it, 15 or so years, I think that CC Plus has been watered down in all kinds of ways, and there are all kinds of things that go on with it. And this sort of last business, whereas you described it, that thumb on the scale, now the state sort of mandating that everybody gets a 5, just sort of, there we go. There's in fact no intellectual justification for having done that. There just isn't. And that's part of why I'm really excited about what you guys did with this, what the whole class did with this.
So, I'd like to just say I'm really, really impressed as well. I want to give anybody in the audience who worked on the project any opportunity to speak if you want to. I'm curious about the process because a lot of these projects are about the extended process, and it sounds like many of you are converts. I'm wondering how that was for you, if you wanted to hold on to what you knew and what you've been striving for so long, if part of this work helped transform any ideas you had, if anybody's like, no way, this is, I want the old way. I'm just curious about the process, because that to me is part of what's intriguing in these project-based circumstances. So anybody want to speak to that?
I was just gonna say, what's really nice of about this meeting and how how validating what you guys are saying. I feel like the entire class was very incredulous about what we were doing here actually being able to be impactful on like anything. Because the second Mr. Carr came up and he said, all right, I have a problem for you guys. I have a project I want you to do. Like, did his little presentation. The second he left the room, we're all like, whatever we do, they're not going to listen to us. No matter like what we do, it always seems like they don't really like, they'll listen to our opinion and then they'll be like, okay. But it's really cool that you guys are like, now we're here though, and you're like saying, yeah, we're taking this really seriously. You can present this to the state. And it's like, wait, all this research, all this time, like that's how we've been like doing this for like.
It seems like half the school year. Very long time.
Basically, we put a lot of time into it, and like, while most of it's been not been like, most people want to do maybe like actual like out of the book statistics. This has been cool, like an actual, somewhat like professional like experience of like real like actual PBL making like something that could be seriously impactful on the school. I don't know, it's just been cool. I think,
Nice.
as an end product.
Anybody else want to say anything before we try to close up here? No? Okay. Well, thank you so
Thank you
much.
all so
Yeah, that's great.
One more thing, I just want to make sure our next steps, so if you talk to Dr. Cryer at all, Ms. Holly, no. So I think probably what we need to do is maybe have a final meeting at the building with this group, the class, and Dr. Cryer and myself, and let's set this policy in motion for next school year, okay? So let's get some final critique out, let's get some final some revisions going here, and really test it a little more, maybe with some other students. But then I think we can go forward. So I love the idea. I think it's probably I've seen a lot of options, and this is one I really think represents maybe the best solution we can find. But
I think there's a sense of the board here that we'd like to see this.
Sure, that's really helpful too to hear that. Yeah, you were saying.
So this is kind of a question that I had for Mr. Smith, but I figure why not ask right now.
Yeah, sure.
If this is put in place, will this be affecting summer college credit plus classes?
Yeah, I would imagine it goes in effect. That's a good question. I suppose we could go in effect whenever we wanted to. At this point, it's too late for this year. My feeling and what I've shared with Dr. Cryer all along is we have to let kids know before they make choices about what classes
Well,
they
that's
want
why
to
I'm
take.
asking that.
So,
Practicality.
yeah, you guys are in the process of actually scheduling for next year. So
Yeah.
that's an issue already, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we got to move quickly. So I'm thinking maybe before spring break, we certainly have to have this down and ready to go. So we're really pressed for time here. Let's see if we can get together, maybe a meeting next week or something with the class, if that's okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if we are going to go through with this, which I think we are, we need to make sure that everyone is informed, because
Yeah.
I myself was a really tough sell on this.
Yeah.
But I think that for people to accept it, we need to really tell people what it is and
So-
exactly how it works.
So this is an excellent question. I mean, that's a great point, and actually a big problem that I have regularly in my job, you know? Just getting people to support, you know, what we're trying to do. And so my question
Or to
is.
fully understand it.
Yeah, right. And so my question is, how do we do that, David? And so I wonder if it might be better before making a final call on this, that we get some feedback from your peers first about this work.
Actually, we did try and do that.
You did? How'd that go?
Not
It
well.
wasn't organized, it just, there were
We took a lot of time on making a survey, and we thought, you know, we got it done, and we were like, well, this is going to be great. We kind of polished it, made sure that everything, we were like, all these questions are going to make sense to the kids, and they're going to like be able to answer them well, and it's going to be fine. And then we tried administering it, and the first hitch was that only one teacher administered it for one day, which is bad. We were planning on having 3 teachers administer it, and one actually hit all the marks.
So I wonder if you have any other ideas of how you can, what have you learned since then that would be the best way to get
Well,
some
no
support
matter
on this?
what you think makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to other people.
Piece of wisdom, right? Hey, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, no, just the difference is that we had like a formal like explanation of what the issue was, like what was going on with like legislation and such. but then like we showed this to these classes, it's like, would you prefer a CC plus or AP class with a 4-point scale or a 5-point scale given an H and write it? They're like, what is
So there's no context.
Yeah, no, definitely, that was the main thing.
What colleges?
They didn't really understand what they were
So
doing.
you guys have studied it for 6
So
months.
yeah, no, like that's the thing. Sorry, but the survey was good for us. Like if it was students that had received an explanation, be like, yeah, it was
And
happening.
we were definitely pushing for some sort of presentation before the administration of the survey, but it just never really came to fruition.
Yeah, it seems like you have to distill this down to a level that everyone can understand, you know, it makes sense in a quick, concise way. I think this presentation gets at it, and maybe there would be a way to use this to sell it to your colleagues, you know, at the school, and maybe that's a good way to do it. Let's think about that. I mean, let's think about that being maybe the first step before we say, here's what we're going to do, you know, next year, okay? I think that might be a good idea, and maybe not quite commit to it yet until we know that your colleagues are on board. And here's the other thing I'll say, is we don't need 100% of your colleagues on board, right? I think we just need consensus, which to me means the will of the group is known. If the will of the school is known and what the kids want to do going forward, then I think you have enough to push forward with this initiative.
Okay.
Really quickly, I just wanted to know, you said you were reluctant and you were somehow sold. So like, to me, that's what I'm really wanting to know. What's your reluctance? Because clearly that's going to be other reluctant than what won you over. But what was the reluctance first? When you first heard it, what made you go, no, this can't work or won't work for me? And then what made you go, actually, this seems like a good idea?
Well, I really wanted to get 5s next year because I plan to take like I still am planning to take a lot of AP classes next year and college courses, but what really sold it was for me was seeing that colleges view how colleges view it is what sold it for me because once I realized that the H in the college's eyes it doesn't really matter. It was kind of like, well, I mean, what's the point of it in the first place?
Okay, so then your reluctance was based on you just knew this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
Hearing this made you go, oh wait, well if colleges aren't worried about
Colleges
that, then I can now look at this. And so I'm just asking because that sounds like something where that must be a major reluctance right there.
Yeah.
I already think I need to do this. And so I was just wondering, I was not in this bracket of groups, so I'm learning a lot, because those numbers are like, wow, you can actually.
That's fine. Not as fun at all. Okay, friends, we would much rather interact with you than get back to our business. That is absolutely clear.
Yes.
But we do
But
need to
thanks
do
for
that. Thank you all for
Yeah.
coming. Thank
you.
you. Very
And thank you, Ms.
impressive.
Holly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Masai. This is a great project, and courageous of you to take it on, and we really appreciate it. So, thank
Well,
you.
even with their reluctance, it has been fun.
Yeah.
And I would like to thank you too for listening to them, because that was the sell on this project. They did say, we want our voices heard, and I think it was tonight, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we'll get together next week.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay,
I mean,
get my,
as of now,
because the pizza is ready now.
Are we allowed to talk now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Bye, Gino.
Do you know whose phone that is?
All right, we are moving into our administrative.
It's got Pokemon Go up.
Scope, Mr. Hausch.
I don't know
Matt,
whose it is.
you wanna
Hi.
do your
Yes,
administrative
yes,
report?
I would love to.
This is your
Yeah, no,
Back to the.
Back to business.
I'll see you later.
Here we go.
All right.
Okay, so jumping right in, I kind of previewed Black History Month last month, and what we were doing.
That's great.
And so we had a wonderful month, and probably one of the best things was the assembly that we committed to on February 21st, honoring all of the local hidden figures. They were in attendance, and I think they felt very honored. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it was a great effort, and I think our kids learned a lot and really brought the school together. Some pictures of John Marrow there from his visit. he just jumped right in and really enjoyed working with students and asking them questions and showing them giraffe videos on his phone or whatever he was doing. We had to get the big hook and just kind of drag him out of classes because he would stay there all day. But it was a nice opportunity for a couple of our teachers to really highlight the project work. And, you know, I think he was very impressed.
Very.
And can I just, you know, for sort of the public record, for people who aren't aware, John Marrow, in the world of education journalism, is a giant. You know, the dean of all of this. The fact that he came and spent a day in our schools is just, you know, it's a remarkable thing. And so kudos to the people who helped organize this, but I also know that he came away really impressed with what was going on here. And so this was a big deal.
Yeah, can I add to that, Steve, if you don't mind, really very quickly? John Marrow left, and we had a conversation with him, and I shared this with our faculty last week actually on Friday. But he came and he left, and one of the things he said to us before we left was, you know, he said, I've been to a lot of public school districts. You may want to write this one down, Carol.
Why don't you type it up?
And if you need me to give you this quote later again, I can do this.
Speak slowly.
He says, I've been to a lot of public school districts, and he said, honestly, this is the best public school district I've ever been to.
Wow.
And John Marrow's been to schools across the country, and he's seen a lot of places. He was so impressed with our kids and our teachers and the work that they're doing. It was amazing. And yeah, I was choked up at the affordability project in Shannon Wilson's classroom. It was amazing. We got kids spouting off college economics 101 as fourth graders, literally, and talking deeply about supply and demand and on and on and on, and it was a powerful experience. It's just getting better too. You know, I know you've seen the class, but it's even since then, it's just like, it's getting bigger and better. So, yeah.
And it was a powerful example of how project-based learning can level the playing field, because we're seeing kids that might not have traditionally been engaged or successful in a kind of regular traditional classroom environment that are really standing out, and that's one of the reasons Mario was choked up, because he saw an example, on that day. So that was great. And then just quickly, the Boys and Girls Night Out effort. It's an annual thing, but I can't tell you how important it is for our students, and especially with the recent tragedy in Florida. And we had our Boys Night Out, just a week after that or so, and we just had very, very powerful conversations about school violence and about gun laws. And these 5th and 6th grade boys were super engaged, very knowledgeable. The level of conversation was as good or better than conversations we have with adults. It's just they really understand what's going on, and they're very passionate about it. So. And it wasn't just that. We were talking about the Me Too movement. We were talking about sexual harassment. We were talking about some traditional kinds of fitting in bullying things. And it's just a really powerful night for everyone. And what we're talking about is transitioning it to the daytime so that every student can be involved. And that's something that the middle school and high school has done. And John Gudgel and I have been talking about that, so that's probably how it's going to transition next year, because we want everyone to benefit from it.
Nice.
I would just like to
yes,
second that I attended both the Hidden Figures as well as the Boys Night Out, and both were I was just highly impressed by just how well the students. I've now that I'm invited, I now go just to make sure they know. That I really am dedicated to this position, but every time I go, I'm blown away by just how intuitive and still curious and questioning. And the boys' night was just phenomenal. For a night that they knew it was time to play, when it was time to get serious, I even led one of the discussions, and for the 5th and the 6th graders, and both times they were into it. They were ready. They knew when it was time to talk, when it was time to play. And the Hidden Figures and just the whole school being involved and singing Lift Every Voice, it was beautiful. And Blue Soldier was just phenomenal. I just wanted to also say that, and whoever set that up, that was brilliant. It was fantastic. So I just kind of want to thank you. I appreciate Matt. You did a fantastic job. Mario as well. Both of those events. This paper does not begin to describe just how phenomenal both of those events were.
You just wait, Stephen Queen.
Right. That was February.
It's hard work,
Yeah,
but it's rewarding work.
It really is though. So right, February
Nice.
was quite rewarding for me.
All right, well,
So-
thanks.
Tim is under the weather, well, he's having family illness, and so I think he's not going to be here tonight. So you saw his presentation. I think I'm trying to think of what he's talking about statistical class proposals. We just did that.
Yeah.
The one thing I would point out is the presentation of learning, and then maybe Eli can jump in on it a little bit too. But basically, this is the first time. So if you remember in 7th grade and 8th grade the past couple of years. Actually, I think it was just 7th grade the past couple of years, they've done a presentation of learning, and as their parent-teacher conference nights, and it's been pretty powerful when the kids have had to reflect on their projects publicly with their peers and with their parents in the room, and it's been really powerful for reflection of their learning. This year we expanded it 7th through 10th grade, and a little bit nervous about doing that. I think overall, our teachers, I'm sure, a little nervous, and we were all concerned about how it would go, and we got really great feedback from our community and our kids and our parents. And I don't know, Eli, if you want to add anything else.
So I taught in Dayton before I taught here, and my parent-teacher conference nights were often very empty. And that's both anecdotal and situational. But here we met with groups of 3 students at a time, 3 or 4 students at a time in the 10th grade team. I sat in on presentations of learning for both nights, and 3 or 4 students on each team came in and spoke eloquently about both their own work, their own failings, their peers' work, their peers' failings, their successes, their peers' successes. We had parents we had 2 or 3 parents in almost every presentation of learning to hear their students speak about themselves. And since those conversations, teachers have actively said that the words that the students used in their presentations immediately could then be both used with the students afterwards. So if a student said, "This is a problem I have," Deanne was saying that after she heard it in the presentation of learning, it changed how she dealt with the student immediately in the classroom. It's changed our practice in many ways. So it was wonderful. So it's helped student relationships grow. Teachers have wanted to put it, and students have wanted to put it mid-projects as well as at the end of the quarters. And this is just after one experience of it. And really, the 10th grade team, when we set it up to be kind of a low-ball experience. We wanted everyone to feel success, but the amount of success was way beyond what we thought was possible.
Can I share the 2 quotes at the bottom? I think it's really important for the community to hear that. So 2 10th grade parents, folks filled out surveys after the event to give feedback to us about how it went, and 2 10th grade parents made the following quotes. The first one said, "During my working career, I worked for major corporations that spent a great deal of effort and money to teach leadership skills and team skills, first to its young managers and then later to all its employees. The questions and responses in this session were very reminiscent of week-long training debrief sessions I've seen. You are teaching great team and leadership skills to our students. Well done, and thank you." Second parent said, "I love the presentations of learning. I see my children doing so much more than reciting memorized facts. Not only do they participate in projects and take responsibility for completing them on time, they are finding ways to work with a variety of people in a variety of situations and actively reflecting on successes and areas for improvement. They are learning valuable skills that will aid them in all future endeavors, not just school and work, but also communication and relationships." That was pretty powerful.
Real quick before we move on, I just forgot to thank somebody. I'd like to actually have a round of applause for Mikasa Sims. I just, again, I forget sometimes that this is going out.
Wait
For
folks
all
at
the
home.
work, yeah, because I know I thanked you too, but Mikasa Sims and John Gojo for all their work. In February, Boys Girls Night, and Mikasa Sims for the Hidden Figures, it was absolutely amazing all the work she put into it. And so I just really would like everybody to recognize that Mikasa Sims put her heart and soul into it, and it showed immensely. So to you, Mikasa Sims, thank you.
And just to remind you, there's always an other board members item, so that if you remember something.
Oh, there we
yourself
go,
tonight.
okay. Well, see, that one forgot.
Just
Thank
giving you a
you.
little pepper. Okay, because there's always opportunities.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry.
we are moving into thank you, and we are moving into the treasurer's report, financial report.
Okay, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because we are supposed to talk about possible cash carryover policy stuff later in the agenda, and I want to kind of use my time for that. I just wanted to update you that I don't know what Mario's going to say about facilities today, if anything, but the deadline for construction manager at risk quote or proposals is Monday, and I think we are meeting on Tuesday to review those and look at hiring the construction manager at risk. Just kind of an update on where we are at that, because it's finally gotten here, because we had to advertise for at least 30 days, so that it really kind of set that back. I deposited or invested in some new certificates of deposit, and they're a year and a half out, and I got 2.1%, and I was really, really excited.
First time we've seen the number 2, I think.
And then I just wanted to go over, if you could go probably to one of the last 3 pages. I'm not sure where it's at, but I wanted to kind of take the time to explain. Sometimes when Mario and I start talking, I just get ideas of what I can do to like kind of compare things and do some analysis. Right here, that one.
Which one? Page 12. Okay.
Right here. So I wanted to see when we got our tax rates, which was just recently put up on the Greene County Auditor's website. This is all of our levies. I kind of wanted to see where we were in comparison to, because we had that valuation increase, which I also put inside your packet. I don't want to go over that right now, but since people were saying that their property value increased, what some would say significantly, it seemed like the average is around 7 to 8%. That would make our millage rates go down. So what I did is I wanted to see every single levy in comparison to where it was in 2017 to where it is this year, since we are not all the way on the floor yet. So what is supposed to happen is the Greene County Auditor backs those rates down until we receive the amount of money that we are supposed to have received when voting the millage in, with the exception of new construction that adds to the valuation, and we get the new millage on that. But so I just took last year, this year, told you, showed you what the differences were, where levies increase, decrease, and all that. So on the whole, for the 20 mil floor, we decreased 0.014447 mils. So then, but this is not all the ones that go into the general fund. We have our 2 emergency levies that go into the general fund, and then we have our separate PI fund and our separate bond retirement fund. And those rates have also changed. So I wanted to show you the change in those. And the emergency rates, we're supposed to collect that certain amount of money. So to collect 1.06 million last year took 7.9 mils. This year takes 7.5 mils. To collect the 915,000 last year 7. This year 6.6. So on the whole, our levies decreased by 0.824289. Which the reason I wanted to share this is because. I know people feel like they're paying a lot more money because of the increase in their property values, but what we are receiving is actually the same. That's why all of those were back down. We are basically going to receive the exact same. Now, what I had told you before is that we might, if we get back all the way down to the floor, we might be able to absorb some of those increases. That's obviously not going to happen this year, and then the next, in 3 years, we'll have a reappraisal year. This was just the triennial update, which is done by a computer, basically. And then the reappraisal is actually when they'll spend the next few years going around to houses and seeing what the values are. So I just thought that was an interesting information to share. Also, the tax budget hearing is on March 20th at 10:30 a.m. That's why I said if anybody would like to go. I don't know what, he only met with, I think, 4 school districts, so he wants to meet with me and talk with me about something. So I don't know what that's going to be, but
I think the Career Center's been called into one of these as
yes,
well.
it was Cedar Cliff, Xenia, us, and the Career Center, and I think that's the only ones that were called in.
Yeah.
So that concludes my reports unless anybody has any questions.
It's March 20th, sorry, again.
10:30 a.m.
I think that really is interesting that the millage has dropped 0.8 in a year. That, yeah, I wouldn't have guessed
Right,
that.
I wouldn't have either.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing, I just said you're going to approve, the gap preparation is taking our cash basis books and doing it, making them accrual, and also complying with GASB, which is all accrual accounting type stuff, and they just keep making more and more things that we have to comply with. There is no way I could ever do this on my own, so as a service I contract out. I've been working with Sean Fraunfelder for probably 15 years. And I do the portion of the work that I can do myself, and then he does most of the reporting to keep us in compliance with all of the laws and changes, and really get quite a bargain on that. And he always lets me, we don't ever pay $4,500, he lets me do as much as I can, and then he always tries to keep our costs as low as possible. And then the Ohio Public Employees Deferred Compensation Program is something where school districts can offer for their employees to have 403B tax sheltered annuities or 457s. This is also another type of annuity that if one employee asks for it, we do have to provide it. That is Ohio law. So we did have an employee ask for this, so we are just, this is the route you have to go in order to start offering for someone to be able to deposit their money into this. And that's it.
Okay,
Just,
go ahead.
thanks for pointing out the levies and the effective rates, and always kind of reminding not only us, and we live in this world so we understand it, but then our listening audience, that, you know, because we're seeing in the news and other places, like, my valuations went up, I don't understand it, I'm paying a lot more. Am I paying more for schools now already? Am I doing this? The people don't really understand it. And so even no matter how many times we actually explain it, because it's hard to understand. And millage, like who really, what's that, you know? But I think as whatever we can do to continue to communicate that when your property values go up, you know, we always collect the same amount of money. The same amount that was passed, we pass a dollar amount that's translated, and then that factors down. If we can continue to explain that, and hopefully maybe people begin to understand it. Or call Dawn, and she'll explain it again.
She loves it.
What's that number?
I've had enough of you today already.
All right, thanks. Okay, so we're moving into the financial portion of the consent calendar. 3.2 to 3.3 is there a motion? And those are the things that Don just explained. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions or anything? Okay. Roll call.
Don?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Aida?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Moving into the superintendent's report.
Okay, so I'm going to just very briefly say, I think Eli pretty much explained Marsac Professional Day pretty well. And I agree with everything he said. And I think it was a powerful experience. Eli actually led one of the meetings along with Jen Clark, and they really added an interesting twist onto creating new projects where people look at purposes rather than products. And because oftentimes when we're talking about driving questions, we tend to drift towards products as opposed to purposes. And really it's about purpose, and then the product helps you fulfill your purpose. And so that was a really interesting addition that helped, I think, frame the work that needs to be done better. In addition, and I thought the Coke project was pretty great as well, and working with those. And I want to recognize both Aida and Sylvia, who were both there, full participants, and very quickly turned into criminals.
Speak for yourself.
Actually, Sylvia
And
was
I
not.
mean that literally.
Sylvia was not a criminal.
I
in
was
the process.
advocating against criminal activity, but it was scary how fast people thought of that when they were in their poverty persona. It was,
Yeah, it was
that was
really,
very well done.
really interesting experience in that way. So I'll move on to the second issue, which is the facilities update, and I just want to share a couple things. So since the last meeting we did get, we had our community forum, and that was last Thursday, I believe, and it was a really great opportunity. I think the paper reported on it today. 75 community members came to the meeting. It was a great opportunity to share the plan as it looks, and the community's plan as it looks, which right now is a model from the top down, more of a sky view model, or as they call the site plans, if you will. And there was a little bit of discussion and sharing of what's actually going inside the building addition itself. I think the discussion went great. The community had some really wonderful questions. There seemed to be a lot of excitement and energy around the plan itself, and especially the instructional elements and changes that will happen, and how students will learn a little bit differently within that space, and how that space can accommodate the learning styles of the 21st century learner. The one thing I think that really came out that I thought was fascinating, and this is really the community's plan, and I think Carol reflected this in her article today, which is this idea that this was not my plan. It wasn't necessarily the board's plan. I had a strong interest in, and I was really liking this idea of a K-12 campus here at Mills Lawn, and ultimately the community didn't want that, and the community very clearly said we would prefer separate facilities at separate times, and we decided to wanted to work on the high school, middle school first, and they also talked about keeping portions of the building as well. And the community further asked us to look at funding this using a combined property and income tax, and so all of that input that we heard repeatedly from the community was ultimately incorporated in the plan. And so this started with the 2020 plan. It has evolved to here we are now in 2018 working on this plan, and I think in earnest this is the community's plan, and it's a reflection of what we heard from the community, and we're excited to see where this goes moving forward. I will say over the next couple weeks, on March 21st, we have a visit, so we want people to get on a bus tour to go to Bethel High School in Bethel, Ohio, and check out a school that has some similar features to what we're talking about doing in our building. We will also then go straight from Bethel High School to the Northwest Dayton Library that has other features that we are interested in looking at as well, and we'd love for the community to come. There's 40 spots available. Right now we only have 6 people signed up. So please call 767-7381 tomorrow morning and tell Sharon that you want to sign up to be on the bus, okay? Show up at 12 o'clock on March 21st right here in front of Mills Lawn School, and we will make sure you get on there. We'll give you your golden ticket, and you can get on the bus with us and take the tour of those 2 amazing buildings. Right around the same time that happens, we will be sending out we're actually finalizing in the process. We're working on a draft form right now of our 3D renderings of the building and what that looks like. And so it's pretty cool. I've seen an early draft of it, but there needs to be more work that put into it. And we will very soon, in the next few weeks, the community will see those 3D renderings. We're going to send a mailing out, and it will have all the details of what the building will look like from a 3D perspective, and get more information as well. And it's going to be a mailing that goes to every member of the community and business in the community and their homes. So look for that before the end of March.
Great.
And the vote is May 8th, but you can start voting April 10th. Please go out and vote.
All right. Thank you.
And then the last item, school safety. So one of the things that's, I have to tell you, after the Parkland shooting, it was a real, everybody was down in the district, our teachers, our students, and it was it really shook not just our community, obviously, but the whole country. And really, I've been heartened to see the reaction from the students in Parkland, and I read a great article about this, talking about how the students in Parkland were prepared for this moment and how they reacted, because their school focuses on the arts, it focuses on a lot of deeper learning elements, and like Yellow Springs has a lot of those elements in it, and the kids were prepared for this moment to be able to really lead, I think, change. And so I'm heartened by that happening. I think it's a movement that feels like it had to be led by kids, and they've done great work with that. But I want to say that for our part as a school district, we do have, safety is obviously a top priority for us. Making sure our students and our staff are safe is our #1 priority as a school district. We have a safety plan with very specific procedures of how we deal with safety, including if there were an active shooter in the building. We do safety drills every single year along those lines in each of our buildings to plan for it and test and make sure that we're following our protocols. This spring, we actually have another safety meeting that we're going to do another update on. And actually, safety plans have progressed and really grown tremendously over the past several years. Now we're at a point where it's shared very easily with our local law enforcement officials, electronically, and in a way that's, they have maps that they can pull up on their computers immediately, and really helps to speed up the process and help us get the support we need. Our buildings right now have doorbell systems, which we put in place, if you remember, a couple years ago. So we officially locked the doors, all the doors of the building during the school day for the first time a couple years ago. And I feel like it's the right decision, and I feel like we made the right decision at that point for our community. Our teachers for a long time have been saying that that's important to them and their safety, and I think we listened to them, and I'm glad that they spoke up and shared that. But one thing we don't have in our current buildings, well, we have the doorbell system, we don't have vestibules, which is a spot that when the kids enter the building, it's sort of a glass enclosure where you sit before the office staff can see you through glass, and then they can let you in. And it forces the person entering the building to go into the office before they go into the building. And so they automatically are ushered in that way, and they have to be let in through the glass enclosure, face to face, while the office staff actually sees the people that are actually entering the building. Most schools have those nowadays, these vestibule systems. We don't. And so that's a safety feature that we could use. And I think if we do get a new building, I think that's something that will be incorporated in every building we do. Second piece we have that's a little bit of a challenge for us is that we have a building with a second and third floor, which creates real challenges if we want our students to operate the first, to enact the first element of our protocol, which is to run. You know, we have a run, hide, fight protocol, and running is the most effective way to prevent injuries and death, essentially, in this kind of, in an active shooter situation. And so it's exceptionally difficult to do that on the second and third floor of the building. The plan we're talking about for this levy will be a single floor plan, and so that makes it easier for kids to exit the building. Each of the classrooms will have windows that pop out where kids can exit through the windows within the classroom, as well as each wing having its own exit doors that are single floor that kids can get out as well. We know that running is by far the highest, it leads to the best likelihood of success in our students' survival. We know that hiding traditionally has been the way we've always done it in schools, but in fact that is not as successful a way to do that. I mean, you look, there's been a lot of research, especially on the Virginia Tech shooting, and how much the fact that people hid in classes actually increased the casualty rate of students in that school as a result. So for us, we're really, this new building project, if approved, really emphasizes the running over the hiding, and certainly over the fighting aspect of it. And we think that's what a lot of modern schools are doing more of, and we think it will increase the safety of our building. So I just want the community to know that we are mindful of this, and we are concerned, and we take safety very seriously as a school district, and we do drills regularly, and we're constantly trying to improve safety for our schools and our building, while also keeping in mind the openness of our community that our community likes and believes in. So,
Can I just add to that, Mario, that in fact this very question came up at our community meeting last week. I can't remember now who asked this question about safety design and so forth, and I thought the architect we've been working with, Mike Rishley, did a very effective job of explaining much of what you just explained, also including just communications systems that can be overridden when somebody pulls a fire alarm, which is of course what happened in Parkland, which we can't do right now in the current building. So we're not designing this building around security, but it will be a more secure facility. I think that's what I took away from his presentation last week.
That's all I have for my report.
I just want to point out, because, we appreciate all our volunteers who offer extracurriculars, but this is pretty exciting that Kate Lohmeyer is going to be doing our girls' soccer team.
Yes.
So I know she's been approached before, and
Yeah.
I just want to say yay.
Yeah, Kate is awesome. If you have not met Kate Lohmeyer, she's our middle and high school physical education and health teacher, and she's just a great role model for our kids and our young women, I think especially. And she's just an amazing. When we talk about International Women's Day, this is a woman that really I think we can look up to in our schools, and is a great model for our students of being physically active and strong. And I think she's great, and so we're so happy that she's going to do soccer. It's going to be huge. She's amazing. Not on top of everything else I just shared, she's also an amazing soccer coach and has a great history of that in other places. And so she's finally going to do it in Yellow Springs. And I understand why she was hesitant. She really wanted to do well in her job teaching and learning first, which is what so many of our teachers say. And she wanted to feel like she was really doing well there, and she's amazing at that. And so this is something she feels, I think now she feels comfortable taking on, and the girls are going to be amazing, our young women, going forward. So we're excited about the program.
Yeah, great, thanks. Okay, we are moving into the administrative portion of the consent calendar, 4.2 through 4.7. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All right. Any review of any of these real quickly?
Yeah, so notable is obviously a bus purchase at $90,000. That's a significant expense that we're talking about here. It's needed. Actually, we need 2 buses, but we're purchasing 1 now, and we'll hopefully, I think maybe in another year, we'll be looking at the second bus as well. But we're spending a lot of money repairing that bus, and at some point, when you have a car or a bus that's been used too long, and you continue to try to maintain it and renovate it, you have to buy something new. And so that's sort of a need, and that's why we're recommending this. The other thing I think I want to share, so the Osi Negotiated Agreement, that's a big deal. We agreed to the final year of that contract, which was a 3-year contract with a reopener for salaries in the 3rd year. We negotiated that a few weeks ago, Donna and I did, and had a really good meeting with Nancy, and it was great. We went through it really well and relatively quickly, and that's the negotiated agreement that's provided with the changes you see in your board packet.
Okay, thank you. So we're ready for a vote.
I'm sorry.
Ready for a vote?
Steve?
Me, Steve.
Which
Yes.
one? Aida?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
All right. Okay, moving into the personnel portion of the consent calendar. These are mostly letters and resignations and it's the hiring of our new executive assistant.
Yeah.
And
Stephanie's been waiting for it.
supplementals and so forth. So I don't think there's anything that stands out here, right, except for the Heritage Advisor, which is,
The yearbook?
yeah.
So
All
there'll
right,
definitely
just
be
clarify
another
that
yearbook this year.
Stuff for you already.
Yep, very exciting. All right, I don't think there's anybody have any questions or anything? No? Okay. So, So I guess we're ready for a vote.
So moved.
Oh, motion, sorry.
Yeah,
Gosh, I
motion.
know I did that.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Okay, now,
Aida,
yes.
Dawn,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
All right.
It's official.
Yay.
Thank you for sitting through all of that, too.
You may want to quit
I
now.
I actually found this really enlightening, so.
Good, good. All right, we have a board work session coming up on March 20th at 4 o'clock. I just want to remind folks, Maureen and I and Dawn will be setting the agenda on the 13th. And the work session will be here on the 20th at 4 o'clock. We are going to move into the cash carryover topic for some discussion.
To kill trees, but
boy.
since I just finished researching this today, I've been spending a couple of days really trying to find some pertinent information, and it just was not easy to do, so. It's also on the drive, if you want
Okay,
to call it
I'll
up
pull
for
it up, yeah.
everybody else, but, I thought,
I know.
because what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it as quickly as possible, is I'd like to just read through everything, and kind of explain it, because I think if you read it on your own, it's gonna make absolutely no sense to you. So, what I did is when we have talked about having some sort of cash balance policy, we've talked about more about just having a reserve. We already have a budget reserve right now that has like $354,000 in it, I believe. And that is based on, we're right at around a $9 million budget right now. So $9 million of revenue is what I projected on the 5-year forecast this year. So we're holding aside $354,000. Don't ask me what percent that is because I don't know off the top of my head. But when I started doing this research, much to my surprise is they're not necessarily talking about what you should put in your savings account anymore. They're talking about what do you want to fund in your budget. So it's kind of a backwards way of thinking of things, as in you have like all of your money's on the side sitting here, but you want to fund 9.2 million the next year. And then when you're working on your 5-year forecast, you kind of say, okay, and then we know what's coming up this year. And it's really very, very intensive planning on what you want to budget for those years. So the way that this works is there are, I could not hardly find, I just Googled and went to different school districts and just found very few school districts that had an actual fund balance policy. So I did find, I have 2 examples that I'll show you after I go through this, but I just had a really hard time finding much of anything. So your general fund can have basically 5 different types of fund balances within it. Right now we have 2. We have, and I'll explain it to you when I get there, but you can have a non-spendable fund balance. That cannot be spent because they are not in a spendable form, such as inventory, or are required to be maintained intact, such as like a non-expendable trust or an endowment. So you can't touch that money, it's non-spendable. A restricted fund balance. These are things that you can't spend because they are limited by external parties, laws or regulations, constitutional provisions, or enabling legislation. So there would be another reason you can't touch that money or put it like in your general fund. Committed fund balance. Those are committed for specific purposes by formal action of the board. And I think a long time ago we did that with that general fund reserve balance, but that was probably, that was in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. So that's been a long time ago, and I don't think we necessarily committed it for anything in particular. We just committed to put it into its reserve. And then there's an assigned fund balance, which is intended to be used for specific purposes, but are neither restricted or formally committed. The intent can be expressed by the board or by an individual or subordinate high-level body to which the board has delegated authority, which would mean we had like a fund sitting here that I would come to you, Mario would come to you and say, we'd like to use some of these funds for a certain thing. And then not necessarily even having to have your approval, but maybe your blessing to say, okay, that's fine, or however we would set that up. Then there's your unassigned fund balance, and that's any remaining monies that are not in any of these other categories. And that's basically what our general fund is now. We are just carrying it as an unassigned fund balance with an assigned fund balance of that $354,000. So-
we have D and E is what you're saying for all?
Right now, we
purposes
just
right
have
now.
D and E.
Okay.
We don't have any of the other ones, to my knowledge. Okay, so the fund balance policy, the primary objective is to govern the level of unrestricted fund balance and to maintain adequate resources to cope with contingencies. So the GFOA stands for Government Finance Officers Association. They recommend a fund balance of no less, this is the minimum, no less than 2 months of regular general fund operating revenues. So for us, that's about $1.5 million. But at the same time, you might want to work in percentages. So the minimum target percentage of revenues would be 5 to 15%. So 15% is $1.4 million. So they're right around relatively the same anyway. So what you want to consider when you're thinking of where you might want to, because what we're looking at is years out, what we could spend down to, which would be, okay, saying when we're doing 5-year planning and negotiations, if we do not want to go under $1.5 million. So factors consider, the predictability of revenues and the volatility of your expenditures. So you could have a windfall in revenue, you could have a loss in revenue, you could have something happen with your expenditures. Perceived exposure to one-time outlays, such as natural disasters, state budget cuts, something that happens that may only happen one time. Drain from other funds due to loss of resources. We have that situation right now. Our Title I funding keeps getting decreased and decreased. We are now funding, well, luckily we got a new grant this year, otherwise we'd be funding Title I tutors out of the general fund. Athletics, we're having to transfer money into that every year. And then our lunchroom has been pretty good for the past couple of years, but we go up for bid this year, and we could get potentially have a vendor that might be more expensive, but might provide something more similar to what we want. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing this planning. Bond ratings and increased cost of borrowed funds. We don't do a lot of borrowing out of our general fund, so that's not an issue for us right now, but it could potentially be in the future. Focus on the unassigned balance as opposed to the unrestricted balance. And the reason I want to explain to you the difference between the two of those is that our unrestricted balance is like our whole general fund, how we have it right now. But your unassigned balance is going to be smaller because you may have some of that unrestricted money put in other places, or it's going to be spent on something else. So there is a difference there. So going to the next page, you'd want to have an unrestricted fund balance replenishment plan. So just say we set it at 1.5 million, we want to see, when do we start dealing with the fact that we're getting closer and closer to that 1.5 million, and how are we going to replenish that 1.5 million? So you want to determine the time period in which the funds will be used, which you would do through the 5-year forecast and showing how you're going to be expending the money. Describe how revenues and expenditures will be adjusted to match any new economic realities, which we basically do throughout the year anyways. We're making adjustments. We've done a reduction plan. We adjust staffing. We do all kinds of things to keep, always trying to stay within some budget. Describe the time period over which the components of the fund balance will be replenished and the means by which. You can look at, if you have like a windfall, that would be called a non-recurring revenue. Budget surpluses, where you can take that money and say, okay, we didn't spend what we thought we were going to, so we're gonna use that to cover what we've had as a potential deficit. Excess resources and other funds, there would be some laws behind that, so that I'm not really entirely sure about, but it was one of the suggestions. And then one of the methods that we have used is we pass new money, and that was how we were replenishing our unrestricted fund balance. If you have an overage, you also could have an unrestricted fund balance overage plan, where you have a really good year and you've gotten some monies that you weren't expecting, or there's an upturn in the economy and it looks like your income tax is going to stay a certain way. It may reflect a structural trend, and so you need to describe how this would be addressed, like our income tax bouncing back. We're getting more. We're really now just getting to the level we were at. But if we start getting more, how do we want to use that money? Communication strategy. for large changes in fund balance. So this is kind of what like we're dealing with going to the Budget Commission. We may have to explain why we have it and what we're going to do with it. But a good thing to do is just keep communicating about that you are aware of this and that you are also addressing it and acknowledging it. Use of overage funds, this is coming straight from GFOA. Use of overage funds should be prohibited as a funding source for ongoing recurring expenditures. So what they're saying is when you have overages, maybe you should discuss other options of what you would like to do with that money and do it on an ongoing basis. Okay, so risk factors when you are determining what you would like your assigned reserve fund balances to be. You need to look at your revenue volatility. So for us, for example, one things that I never know from year to year are what's our open enrollment going to be, how's our income tax going to do, and then state funding, you know, we've got a $200,000 and $300,000 increase over the past few years. Is that going to stay? And I can only plan that on a 2-year basis. So you need to monitor trends and averages, see what other sources might be good to set aside in the case of a reduction or loss in some of these areas. So looking at, okay, maybe if the budget's going to be over that year, taking some just our property taxes and saying, well, income tax isn't looking very good, so maybe we should assign some property tax money over here in case the income tax comes in under budget, which is not going to happen this year. Last year it did happen. Design plan for overages. And like I just wanted to reiterate that it is encouraged that you don't just keep, well, what we're doing now, keep socking it away in our general fund budget. They're saying to try to do some things with that. Risk factors and infrastructure, repairs and replacements, and this was ours specifically. We have a permanent improvement fund that's $130,000 a year. That really in the repair and replace world is nothing. We are buying this bus out of the general fund because of that, because we don't want to take $90,000 out of the permanent improvement fund when we, you know, depending on what happens in May, we need a new roof at the high school on the gym. So it's just planning ahead. Define short-term and long-term needs and projects and set aside funds to cover. Vulnerability to extreme events, that's more, you know, what has happened in your location. We're pretty safe from that, but you just have to consider that, and if something could happen, and see if you want us to set aside money for that. Leverage, the amount of debt and effect on our financial flexibility. Since we do have a lot of debt, I don't know how this affects the general fund necessarily, because the debt that we have, other than our House Bill 264 loans, which are done in 2021, we are all funded through that debt service fund. So that would really only be an issue for us if, for some reason, not enough monies weren't being collected, but that really wouldn't even be our fault. That would be something that we would take up with the Greene County Auditor. The only other thing is, though, is like we have this debt going on in May, and we are really over leveraged with that. And so that's why we have the income tax coupled with the bond issue property tax. So we'd really be done. So I don't even know that we could borrow money with general fund money. I'm not even really sure. Expenditure volatility, that for us is things like negotiations. We had a 10% insurance increase last year. Our purchase services are always going crazy. These are things that you're putting in a 5-year forecast, but GFOA also says it's great you're doing your long-range planning, but you really should only talk about 2 years at a time, because that's the only place you're going to be the most accurate that you can be, is knowing what's coming up in the next year or two. Liquidity cash flow. For us, we have our cash balance, and then I've gone out in investments, so you already know, like I've got $250,000 I've invested for the next 2 years. So that is something that we can't touch. We can't put that anywhere because it's sitting, it's going in there. Or we could assign it into something that we might need in 2 years or something like that. It's just a whole layering of planning. And then the assignment of funds. If we were to do some policies like this, then we would need to know in our general fund all the time what's unrestricted and what is assigned elsewhere, and always keep that information getting out. And then the growth of the community, we do in Yellow Springs really have a very small growth, so it's not as big of an issue, but if you are in a higher growth area, then you need to set aside some fund for contingencies, because you don't know what money's coming in and when and how much and all that. So that's not really too much of an issue for us. So what is suggested is to segment your reserves as opposed to one policy that targets one number, which is saying, okay, we want a 15% reserve or 2 months of revenue. It's saying don't target one number, target your plans and your projects and your ideas and segment them into different assigned funds. And then their suggestion is because it makes the different categories make the reserves more transparent. So you have a plan for that money. You're not just taking money and socking it aside. You're saying, okay, we might need it for this, 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 or this, and then using it later. Some of the examples that they provided were a reserve for emergencies, a reserve for economic uncertainty, and then like something I suggested was maybe like a reserve for a drop in open enrollment, if we had that in a year. A volatile, and these are some of the policies that they were suggesting, is not just having one policy, but having a volatile revenue policy. So when predicting or experiencing a high level of revenue income, apply this revenue towards non-recurring uses, such as paying off debt, building up a reserve, special projects that will reduce future operating cost. So when we have a good year, just saying we have the ability to put that money somewhere else that we might use it for something else. A grant policy, and I typed in this whole paragraph myself because as much as I've talked about grants, the effects it has on my office, I've never seen it so eloquently put as it was put here in saying everything that I've wanted to say about grants. So it says, grants are an attractive form of funding for many local governments because they offer the possibility to reduce reliance on taxes and fees drawn from the community. On the other hand, grants can harm the government's long-term financial position if they lead to implementation of an ongoing program that later requires support from the general tax dollars when the grant expires. Further, many grants require matching funds and overhead costs that might end up diverting funds from the higher priority services. A policy can encourage grant seeking, but should also recognize the risks of over-reliance on grants and direct the organization to manage those risks. So they had some sample policies. I didn't print any of those out, but I just wanted you to know that's how I feel. That's what I've been trying to say. And then infrastructure maintenance replacement schedule. Your repairs and replacements can be volatile. So they consider translating potential needs into a regular schedule with a set annual contribution to funding that schedule, which is like when we talk about our roofing needs, truly setting aside money, which we could do in the permanent improvement fund as well. This is not just for the general fund, but roofs are so expensive, we may need to use some general fund money. So if we know we're only going to have this much money in the PI to pay for it, so we're going to need this much money from the general fund, start putting that money away now and reserving it, knowing that that's going to happen. So it's just, I was just fascinated by all this information, which you may not be as much as I was, but it's a totally different backwards way of looking at it, which seems to be so much more intuitive than just saying, I want to put this money in a savings account for a rainy day fund. So I just found it very interesting, and I will certainly do the homework. If you are interested in looking at some of these things, I can talk to Janice from Neola and see if any other school districts have done any policies like this, if they have sample policies. I think it's certainly something to look into, and it does to me seem far more transparent than just saying we have this rainy day fund. I did find 2 policies, those are also in here. Did I scan those? Yes.
Yep.
One is Forest Hills. And they just have a cash balance reserve target. A lot of what's in here is kind of what I've already said, but like their plan, they're just looking at 2 years at a time and basically seeing what they're going to do in those 2 years if they're not meeting their general fund cash balance reserve target equal to 10% of total revenue. So then they look at it, they look at their 5-year forecast, and they look closely at 2 years to see how they're going to maintain that. That's just kind of what their policy says. And then this next one is from Wisconsin, and they listed out the different kinds of funds and are using the different kinds of funds within their budget. But the last paragraph on the last page is what I find interesting. It says, should the unaudited year-end assigned fund balance in the general fund be above the maximum designated amount, The board shall consider committing a portion of that fund balance for a specific purpose or reducing a subsequent year's tax levy. I was surprised anyone would ever put that in writing.
Interesting.
But, so other people are doing this, just not very many.
So, can we jump in? Sean, you have been bringing this up on and off, diligently, patiently, and is this sort of, in a sense, what you've been getting at all along?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been bringing up this, what do we do? Should we have a policy?
Right.
So this jumps us ahead of many of the questions we might ask ourselves because you've done a lot of the homework, at least initially what's out there. So I think it's a great jump start. I think from my perspective is, how do we get from today now to some recommended policy or guidelines that are brought to the board? You know, what's the next step? And what, you know, in the process, whether that means, you know, a very traditional way, we form a task force, a subcommittee of some kind, and then we can decide who's on that. And we'll look through all this and ask other questions and sort through other examples, and then bring some drafts back to the board for input and feedback. You know, like that would be one way. We charged on with coming up with all the answers. And the administration, Mario. I wouldn't recommend that personally, but you know, I think there should be more people involved in it.
So, if I'm understanding the big picture here, and I very well may not be, but in a sense, this is project-based budgeting. Is that what this sort of reduces to?
It is, yeah.
So rather than, as you said, rather than sort of squirreling away a fixed sum or a fixed percentage of an annual budget in a rainy day fund, and every state has a rainy day fund, and somehow it never rains, so that money sort of sits there often. This would force us to sit down and think about specific priorities and how we would achieve them. Am I understanding that sort of correctly? So, for example, we've just authorized the purchase of a bus, but the superintendent said, in fact, we need 2. So if that were a priority now, we could say, okay, we are now going to start to budget for the second bus, which we are going to purchase in 2 years or 3 years, which means we're going to put aside something into a bus fund.
Yes.
Rather than saying 3 years from now, our bus no longer has an axle, where can we scrounge up the money to buy a new bus? Is that sort of how this goes?
It's a piece of it.
Yeah.
It's not
That's all I could
the whole, to
understand.
me, I didn't take it as the whole premise. It's also saying, you know, we are willing to budget this amount of money for this year and the next year for our regular operating costs.
Right.
And then, as we go throughout the annual, there's just so many other things that need set up. You know, if we get more in income tax, say, okay, that doesn't mean that we can go and buy more services this year. What it means is we're thinking about taking that money and putting it over here for something else that we need in 4 years.
Right.
Not in 2 years. It's kind of setting things 2 years at a time, maybe. I mean, it's a lot of work because we would have to be communicating all the time. I'd have to be reviewing my 5-year forecast all the time. But the thing of it is, the reason I'm not intimidated by it is because at the end of every year, I give you my checks. I show you, here's what I budgeted, and here is what is over and under.
Right.
So I'm not afraid to say that my projections were off, because I already tell you that. So that's where you do some planning where, you know, well, guess what, the property tax didn't increase by as much as we wanted, but we did get this in revenue or in income tax, and, you know, see if you feel like that's a windfall and we should put it somewhere. And maybe it's best just to do it after every fiscal year. After the fiscal year is over, seeing where everything ended up in comparison to budget, and then say, okay, we would like to do this and this with certain monies. Or, you know, release money. I mean, you're going to be doing both. You're going to be releasing and putting in.
That hurts. There's something along these lines coming out of some of those community forums around having more scheduled, planned,
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
notions, ideas and stuff. So that feels like that definitely addresses some of the concerns people were talking about there. And I like what you said about gives it a little bit more transparency. And I also think I heard that there's still some flexibility inherent in all of this, that we might have money that's supposed to go towards the school bus, but we're lacking in something else, and so we can make an active formal decision to transfer. There's always that opportunity, even though we have a schedule that hopefully will follow. But like either on an annual year or a 2-year basis, we reevaluate and decide if that needs to shift. Okay.
I mean, it does strike me that approaching it, you said this is the reverse of the way the way you sort of traditionally think about this, but it seems to me it offers us an opportunity to do a lot more proactive budgeting, right?
It is
And
very
rather
proactive.
than
That's why it's
than
a lot
reactive.
more work. We really have to plan ahead.
Yeah, but that could become a process which engages a lot more people, because then you could start to hear about what other people think 4 years down the road or 2 years down the road is going to come up. And you all sitting in the district office may not know that, but somebody in one of the other buildings or some other staff person has got an idea here, and it gets that idea out sooner rather than later when it becomes an emergency.
Right, or even, you already mentioned, you don't have the money in the permanent improvement levy. It doesn't collect enough. But if we're carrying over lots of cash reserves that we're not spending, maybe we could allocate a certain percentage every year to increase that fund.
Yeah.
Because you know you're gonna have scheduled maintenance. There's some scheduled maintenance you know you're gonna have, there's some you don't know. But at least then when you're caught off guard, that fund can cover.
Yeah.
And then there's probably other things we could look at. And then look at I think we do have to have a minimum, they said no less than 2 months. I think the more common practice in the nonprofit sector is 3 to 4 months. So I think that would be something we should look at. But again, my initial question is how do we go from today's conversation to having a policy that we're voting on? And how does the board want to proceed with that? Does the board want to?
Yeah, that's part of the question too. And I mean, I just got this done an hour before the meeting. We're still working on it, and I haven't talked about it with Mario, and I don't have his opinion on it. And I think that's very important too, because it requires both of us to do this kind of planning and disclosure and all of that. I mean, I guess my next step would probably be to talk to Neola and see if any other school districts are doing this already, so we're not reinventing the wheel. And see, and keeping it, not too detailed, as simplistic as possible, but just having a plan. It's really all it is, just having a plan and a process that you do this and
I would think
not
that's the kind of
making
thing
it
you'd
over.
like. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right.
They're not, I mean, I guess in terms of our existing committees, there's a policy committee, so kick ahead. We don't have a finance committee because you think it would probably kick to the finance committee. So I guess, I'm just trying to make sure we're taking the next step so that, and even saying to ourselves, let's have a policy in front of us in 3 months, in 6 months, whatever it is, but let's like kind of write it down and commit ourselves to it.
Well, let me see what I have to work with first. 'Cause I mean, I don't necessarily want to invent the wheel on this, because I don't want to do something that in 4 years, everybody's like, what was she thinking?
Sure, that makes sense.
And I sort of want to digest this as well, but I think your point is, you mentioned a moment ago that maybe at the end of the fiscal year might be a good time to sit and have a 30,000.
That's the only time you can do a true reconciliation.
Yeah, right, and so sort of look at what all, so maybe that's the sort of first soft deadline to begin to consider this would be,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of, it was brought up again because you're gonna do the tax hearing, and you said there might comment on our large cash reserves. So, I mean,
Relatively large cash. I don't like that quote, I'm not a real fan of that.
Our cash,
Yeah, our cash
I mean, what do we have right now? 5 million in cash?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so pretty significant. I mean, so and you said that might be a question you'll get, and I guess it would be nice to be able to state during your hearing that we are working on the development of a fund balance policy that addresses carryover. And so that would be the first thing. And so let's work on it.
Yeah.
And vote on it.
I think it's great.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is this idea of tying all of this to our strategic plan. You know, and ultimately, that really is what should drive this budget and what it does.
Though that raises the other question that has already come up, which is that it's also time for us to start thinking about a new strategic plan. So maybe these things do weave together nicely.
Okay, well, thanks.
Yeah, this was great. I mean, this is sort of my head sort of spinning.
I know, I
This is
really
great.
tried not to go through it
No,
so
no,
fast,
no,
but that's why I
no,
put it
it's
on
great.
paper, because if you want to read
Well,
it again.
there's a certain irony that I worked so hard to sort of figure out the old budgeting system. Now I got 60% of it, now I'm gonna chuck it. So,
All right, well, thank you, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn.
And I can see her, if it's excited, that's good, that's
It
nice.
was very interesting. It was kind of a little PBL project. Now I know why the kids get so excited.
there you go.
Okay, 5.3, Green County Career Center report?
So I guess I want to echo what Mario said a moment ago, somewhat sadly. I think, the Parkland tragedy sent a chill through the building. Students were upset, and counselors were upset, faculty therefore were upset as well. So we did, that was part of our last board meeting. It's what's on people's minds. More substantively, the board has voted to engage what's called a criterion architect to begin to look, to help us think very holistically about what, where, and when we might think about the Take Flight Initiative facility. It's a lot of moving parts, and bringing this firm in a sense, will help manage those moving parts since we can't do all of that on our own. So that's my report from GCCC.
All right, thanks. Okay, any other board member items? Yeah, Sylvia?
I was just gonna say that the High School Musical.
You love saying that.
I do, I really do. Opens this Friday and runs for 2 weekends, so come on out and support all the kids and adults who are making that happen. Thanks.
That's tomorrow.
Yeah,
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. This Friday, which is tomorrow. Wow, where did this week go?
They're doing a run through.
You heard something?
Yeah, I thought that's
Did you
what
hear
that was.
Loudness?
Yeah.
Those are the actor cheerleaders
Yeah.
that are in the High School Musical.
Oh yeah, let's have children. Your kids.
No, not mine.
Mine's doing tech.
Oh, she okay? Great.
There you go.
Wonderful.
Nice.
I was just going to report out that Aida and I are meeting next week with Marianne McQueen and Brian Houch. We have this relationship where we have a liaison from the board, and the village council has a liaison. I'm the current liaison, and Marianne is the current village. Steve when did you start before me? Was it?
Maybe a year and a half or so.
So we've been roughly
yeah.
meeting every few months for the last year and a half, and communicating with one another our priorities, our agendas, what's going on, what's in front of us, what we're thinking about. They would like us to improve that communication. I guess they feel that it's not at a level they're requesting. So we said we would be happy to meet with them and talk about that. They've also requested, actually the paper said it's been a few years they've been asking to have a joint meeting. I know back in August they said they were going to reach out and ask for one. We never actually received an invite. Well, we said that we wanted to make sure we had, because an election was coming up in November, a seated board before we actually...
And a seated council.
And council. And trustees for that matter.
Yeah, right.
And then return to that discussion about a joint meeting. So that's something else we'll talk to them about.
Thank you.
All right, well, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that a community member who has been really, really meaningful to the schools for many years, Wally Sykes, who recently died. And to say that we gave him last year the Bulldog Backer Award because he's been such a prominent advocate and supporter of the schools, having been on almost every levy committee that I ever knew of for as long as I've lived here in Yellow Springs, been either the chair or the co-chair, and he's just been a great guide to the schools. I mean, I've relied on Wally over the years. So it's just great appreciation. Want to extend my sympathies to the family, to the community, who I know has acknowledged and recognized Wally over the years. So anyway, I wanted to give that some special acknowledgement. And I also want to acknowledge Richard Lapides and Maureen Lynch again for hosting John Marrow and really bringing him to the community and making that visit possible, not just to the Yellow Springs area, but to the greater Miami Valley area. That was quite an interesting experience to interact with him and to hear from him and so forth. So very, very much appreciate that. And then I do want to say, Eli said this earlier about the teachers going on the Peru trip. I just want to acknowledge everybody who makes this happen, because this is such an incredible experience for our students. And it's really wonderful to hear that there's 40 students going and that there's that kind of support for this kind of programming. So those kind of international experiences are just mind-boggling and eye-popping. So glad that that's happening for our kids and for our staff and faculty too. So I just want to give a shout out to that. So anybody else have anything? And I think you should go see the high school musical too.
I promise to write things down and save this.
I just wanted you to know there's always more opportunities.
Exactly.
It's just not,
Wanna talk, you
limited.
can talk.
I'd like to thank the principal going on the field trip also.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Righto.
Get my supplies. I'm getting a little worried.
Because next
It's 2
month
weeks
we'll
away.
be
Do you
back
have your
here.
principal supplies already?
Yeah,
I don't
that's
have my
right.
principal supplies ordered or.
All right, anything else for any other board member items? I guess I really want to just reiterate people signing up for the bus tour too. It's just a wonderful opportunity, I think, for community members to see what's out there and what schools currently look like and what it enables students to do. So I just really would, and it's a field trip. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been on a field trip, so.
Bring a sack lunch.
That's right.
Okay, if nobody has anything else, we are moving into our second executive session, and this is the investigation of charges or complaints against a student. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to sort of educate the public, as well as to say that I feel like I have a professional conflict of interest going into this executive session, so I'm going to recuse myself. And what I want to say a little bit about it is that it's very unusual for board members to recuse themselves. Steve did it at his first month here because he didn't feel like he was a part of the levy discussion, an active part as a new member, and didn't feel comfortable to vote. This is not something that we encourage at all, because and we don't exercise. I think in my 12 years I have recused myself one time, and I think maybe one other person has as well for other reasons. But I just want the community to know that this is not easy to just sort of say, okay, I'm walking out of here right now, but there are reasons for that, and Steve, I think, exercised his rights and reasons to do that, and I need to do the same. So just want to let people know that's what's going on. All right, thank you for being here.
Good, so
Thank
we need a
you.
motion?
Yep, we need a motion.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Yep.
Oh my God, no, it wasn't.